It's time to go back to the theater of dreams. And we have come and picked up at a very important location in the Dream Theater discography. This album that we're going to talk about today may not be the one that has sold the most out of their discography. However, for fans of the band that have been with the band perhaps for as short of a period of time as 10 to 15 years, Metropolis 2 Scenes from a Memory is probably the album that is most treasured and beloved by a lot of these individuals. Now, I go as far back as 15 years, and I'm not discounting those fans that have been with the band since the beginning, saying that they could have no appreciation for this album. I just can't speak universally about it. Whenever this album was initially, announced, it was going to be an expansion point of a previous song, Metropolis, The Miracle in the Sleeper. It was going to be a full album, a conceptual release that was going to really take place within two time frames, the present and in the 1920s. And it was going to involve a myriad of characters. It was going to involve hypnotherapy. It was going to involve murder, betrayal. There was a lot going on this record. And a lot of folks will see this perhaps as a catalyst point for the reason why they love this band. I know that that's the truth for me. I remember a long time ago, whenever I was just a young metalhead, hearing Overture 1928 on a digital music station. Whenever I first got digital cable, the very first thing I wanted to do was to see on these digital music stations if there was one for heavy metal, and sure enough, there was. And the Overture 1928 came on, and I was just enthralled. A little bit later on that very same day, I heard Strange Deja Vu, also off of this album. In fact, they are two straight songs in this whole two-act play, if you want to say, this two-act concept album. And both times, with both songs that from what I heard, I was just instantaneously in love. This was the album that propelled me to really love Dream Theater, and there are many different reasons why that is the case, why so many different people perhaps share that idea along with me, and also, and perhaps more importantly, why this album is #1 for me, all time in their discography. This was an ambitious project after the last album, Falling Into Infinity, kind of fell on deaf ears, considering it was a bit of a musical departure from what they had done previously. Dream Theater really needed something big. They needed something that was going to really, I guess, steer people back, because it seemed as though this ambitious two-album project, as it initially was supposed to be, Falling Into Infinity was, that was shrunk down into one album that just kind of shrunk in, importance overall. They needed something really huge in order to kind of get back into really the good graces of a lot of the fans, and really just do something for them. And what they opted to do is they wrote a conceptual piece entitled Scenes from a Memory, Metropolis Part 2. They basically took the characters from the song that had been released on a couple of albums before this, and basically were able to draw a complete and total story around it. It was to the point where there are lyrics directly from one of the songs, directly in one of the pages on the notebook, or in the booklet itself. And I'm not saying that these are just lyrics, period, because the lyrics are in fact present in the booklet. I'm saying that in one of the photographs you see a photo of a newspaper, and the text of the newspaper is exactly what you see from the song, with the exception of the word headline. But that's simply because, as you would expect, the part that was meant to be the headline is in headline text, as opposed to everything else. This album is great and grandiose in many different ways. It really is the best that I've ever seen ever since Operation Mindcrime by Queensryche, a band really tell a story. Now, compared to Operation Mindcrime by Queensryche, where the story is kind of loosely based, you can follow it, but at the same time, if you listen to it really without even thinking about a conceptual release or a conceptual idea behind it, it almost sounds as though it could work parallelly as both kinds of album, conceptual or non-conceptual album. However, with this album, this is exceptionally truthful in the reign that it is certainly a concept piece, considering it is very clearly outlined. The story is very well told. In fact, whenever you open it and you kind of read along with it, it functions just like you were studying up for a play. You remember being a kid, being in grade school and stuff like that, and maybe you wanted to be in one of the school plays, you wanted to have your parents be proud of you, or just wanted to do it to piss them off, whatever the reason was. This really reads a lot like that, and you're really hearing a lot of dialogue between different characters and everything like that throughout the course of the story. And the one thing that I think is kind of cool is that they keep this in a very song construct form by having James LeBray tackle most of the voices, with the lone exception of Victoria. Victoria was handled by a different vocalist for this, and it was just kind of a really interesting concept overall, and that's just on basic bare bones values. Whenever you get into the music, there is, really the Dream Theater that people think about today that are just extremely improvisational on their instruments. They're, virtuosic. They have a lot of different talents, but they also love to play a lot. The songs are extremely long. There is one song on this album, or two of them rather, that exceed the 10-minute mark, and both of them play critical points to the role, to the plot rather, but also play pivotal points to the role. The one that is perhaps the most fondly familiar for me is the very last track on the album, Finally Free, which really showcases the very last portion of the story. It really just, kind of wakes up Nicholas, who was being hypnotized as of the very first track on the album, and kind of descended back into this world in 1928. And he kind of wakes up, and really just more events occur as he is slowly coming to, and he has kind of become entranced with this world. He's fallen in love with Victoria, essentially, and it's such a unique piece. It's such a unique idea, how you can kind of be hypnotized back into another time, and essentially you see everything through these individuals' eyes. You really grow to have a respect or a bane, or have really a deep emotional connection with all of these characters, because it is just as though you were there, and you basically were reliving all of the elements, perhaps, of a past life. Now, if you can digest all of that, just on a basic bare-bones principle scale, we'll return to talking about the music. I got a little off track, because that's what this plot does to you. This plot gets you kind of off track. It gets you thinking about all the individual facets. This is seriously some of the most diverse and most beautiful music that you're going to hear, not only out of Dream Theater, but out of the progressive metal department, probably within the past 15 to 20 years. This is definitely a landmark album for the subgenres that I just mentioned, and it's able to do so because there is such a wide variety present on this album. There are songs that definitely rock hard, that kind of give you a little bit of a sinister feeling. There are songs that give you a little bit more of a hurried feeling. Basically, all the emotions that are felt by the characters on this album are very accurately represented by the music that has been written behind them. So as they're speaking, or as the plot is unfurling, you kind of understand what's going on. Something a little bit softer and a little bit more romantic will be adequately suited with music that suits. Something that's a little bit more chaotic, a little bit more hectic, a little bit more, sinister, evil, whatever you may want to say, murderous, plot-worthy. It's something that is able to, the music is able to represent that just as well. The music follows along the plot line and follows you along the plot line just as easily as the lyrics do, just as easily as the dialogue does. So, in essence, what you have is almost like this is Dream Theater's opera. They could have called this opera theater, and it would have been perfect, with the lone exception of there's no operatic vocals, but who gives a fuck about that? They don't need that. You don't need that on this album. James LeBray's vocals are just absolutely spot on, pitch perfect on this one right here. He just absolutely has the tone down. He has all of the variety. His dynamic range really showcases itself. John Petrucci doesn't have to go above and beyond the Call of Duty in order to be, ridiculous to really rope you in. Instead, he's able to do so through his dynamisty, through the fact that he's able to transition from something slower to something fast, and sometimes mid-song is able to pull a transition out of nowhere to really illustrate a turn of plot, either that or to really illustrate a change of pace. And the way in which all of the parts have been written just beautifully suits what is going on with the album, beautifully suits the plot line. You really feel engrossed in this album, and because of that, this album is extremely difficult to turn off. Now, there are a lot of individuals that look at long albums and find them to be quite tedious. They find them to be rather alarming, not to mention they are large tasks, large mountains for them to conquer. This is an album that does not feel like its time limit. It does not feel like the 72 minutes that pass. It feels a lot shorter. And it's probably because it feels as though, really, if you were just to close your eyes and zone out while you listen to this album and not fall asleep, it's very, very suited that you would basically imagine this entire scene. You would have your own, expectations and dreams of what Victoria would look like, of what Nicholas would look like. Just to name two examples, you could probably see the hypnotherapist slowly pulling Nicholas under. This is one of those albums that has that full pull effect. It wraps you up so much in it, it pulls you so deeply in, and you are so engaged with this that you love every minute of it. Fans will reflect on this album with a lot of glory. Not everybody may cite this album as their favorite Dream Theater album, and that's fair, principally because we all got into the band usually at different time frames and at different levels, and there are different things that really we like more than the others. Some people may just not like concept albums. However, there's definitely a universal appreciation for the work that was concocted with this album. This was definitely an album that did exactly what the band needed it to do, and that was get interest back into the band, really revitalize interest in the band, and not to mention, it showcased just the depth and the true heights of their songwriting ability. This is something that, even though they have tried, I really feel they have not come really anywhere close to matching it. They have come somewhat close, within an earshot, but they have not quite been able to master, once again, the same grandiose majesty, the grace, the dynamisty, and just truly the uniform balance that this album, in its storytelling form, musically and lyrically, has really been able to do. It's tremendous. It's terrific. It's one of CKN top 25 albums of all time. It's Metropolis 2, Scenes from a Memory. Listen to it today. Remind yourself why you love this album. Or, if you've never listened to it before, welcome yourself to a brand new level of just adoration toward the almighty concept album.